Welcome to the Tennessee Anti-Slavery Alliance's second virtual roundtable for the month of January. January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, so we wanted to strategically give the opportunity for a statewide discussion around what Tennessee is doing to come alongside trafficking survivors, fight human trafficking where it starts. And today's discussion is centering around our legislative work as the state of Tennessee. So this is the first of its kind, utilizing what we've grown accustomed to in this year of virtual life. We have the opportunity to hear from our legislators in our Tennessee General Assembly who are aggressively making sure that Tennessee stays number one in the country for our human trafficking, our counter-trafficking law. So each January, our agencies, the three in the Tennessee Anti-Slavery Alliance, End Slavery Tennessee, Restore Core, and Grow Free, strategize together to bring human trafficking awareness more to the forefront as part of the January Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Our agencies collaborate throughout the year as well, and January is just the way that we kick it off. So today I am Rachel Haga. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Restore Core. We are in Memphis, Tennessee, and we cover the 21 counties of West Tennessee as part of the regional plan in the state of Tennessee to respond to human trafficking victims. Additionally, I have with me Congresswoman Deborah Moody, representing the 81st District in Tipton County, Congresswoman London Lamar, representing District 91 in Shelby County, and Congresswoman Mary Littleton, representing the 78th District in Cheatham County. Also with us, of course, is our other co-leaders across our state who are teaming together in this statewide plan to respond to victims. Executive Director of Grow Free Tennessee in East Tennessee, Natalie Ivy, and CEO of End Slavery Tennessee in Middle Tennessee, Margie Quinn. Margie is going to continue the introductions as well as pass it on to Christina Reno with Shared Hope International. So Margie.
Thanks, Rachel, and it's great to see everybody here today. We're really excited to bring this information to the public directly from our state representatives who are on the front lines of the fight to bring great policy for human trafficking survivors in Tennessee. I'm so excited to be joined today. We are joined today by Senior Director of Public Policy at Shared Hope International, Christine Raino. Christine's been with Shared Hope for about a decade or more. Working on a number of different policy initiatives for Shared Hope. And so introducing her today so that she can talk to us a little bit about what Shared Hope has brought to the table in the way of legal framework and response for the states for human trafficking. So take it away, Christine.
Thank you so much, Margie. And thank you to everyone for being able to be here today. I'm really excited about the discussion today and excited to be able to be talking with you right now because we have some new projects really, or a new project that I'm kind of excited to share. So Shared Hope, just for a quick bit of background, Shared Hope is an organization that we've been focused on the issue of child sex trafficking for 2 decades. And the last decade of that has really been focused through our policy project called the Protected Innocence Challenge. And the Protected Innocence Challenge is a project that is tackling the state level policies addressing human trafficking with specific focus on child sex trafficking. And Shared Hope's work we are Shared Hope International, started with an international focus, but over the years of doing research on the markets of sex trafficking, and then really taking a closer look after seeing what the problem is like here in the United States, shifted our focus to domestic trafficking and domestic minor sex trafficking after realizing what a tremendous and just awful challenge this is in the United States. So actually I could put up a slide. I want to share kind of how the Protected Innocence Challenge got us to where we are right now. The Protected Innocence Challenge, we grade all 50 states and the District of Columbia on the strength of their laws in addressing child sex trafficking. When we started in 2011, I think you can see on the map here, that is all of those dark states, those are failing states. And then if you compare to 2019, you can see that there's really been tremendous progress. In 2011, more than half the states were failing. Most states had a D or an F grade. Now in 2019, we have no more failing states. Most states have an A or B. In 2019, I think we just had 2 states that were still at a D level. So it's been tremendously exciting to kind of see that progress. Tennessee in particular too, Tennessee started with a C in 2011 and made its way all the way up to an A. It was one of our first A states when states started to achieve an A. There were no A's that first year. It took 2 years before states started to achieve A's. And now that Tennessee made it to an A, Tennessee has been our #1 top-ranked state for a number of years running now, 3 or 4 years. So we've been so excited to see that progress in Tennessee as well as the rest of the nation. And one of the things I think that's really sort of propelled Tennessee forward over the years has been the tremendous commitment to continuing to come back and keep working on this. I've always just been so amazed to see every year Tennessee working on the next issue, to tackling the next challenge. And that's really what I wanted to kind of very quickly share today, is that in over the 10 years from Shared Hope's perspective, we've also seen the need to kind of take on the next challenge. And now that so many states have achieved A's and B's and have made so much progress, it's also shown a light on where some of the gaps are. So I have a slide that I wanted to show really quickly. It goes to the next one. There we go. Kind of where we've seen the gaps develop is we've seen tremendous progress in states enacting criminal justice laws. However, we have not seen the same level of progress in terms of establishing victim protections. And this led us to really step back and take a look and say, what do we need to do next? Where do we go from here? And the decision was made to basically develop an advanced framework and to raise the bar for states. And so with that, we spent 2 years working with stakeholders across the country, getting input from our state partners we've worked with over the years, AG's offices, governor's offices, human trafficking coordinators, to really find out where to go next with addressing the gaps that we saw remaining in states' progress. And so now, and actually we can switch to the next slide, we are operating under a new advanced framework that we just released in November, just 2020. And coming up in November 2021, we will actually be releasing the inaugural report cards applying that new framework. And we're really excited to work with states and to provide the support and assistance also with moving forward under the new framework. And I'm also happy to, during the discussion, to kind of share where Tennessee might be able to kind of really move forward. But we're really excited to raise the bar and really see states, including Tennessee, kind of take this next step.
Thanks so much, Christine. I appreciate all of that information, and I look forward to kind of how we have a chance to discuss where Tennessee is headed. I wanted to thank all of our representatives for being on the call today and give you guys an opportunity to share a little bit about kind of your evolution and experience in getting involved with the issue of human trafficking, your perspective on that. And if you have some examples of statutes and legislation that you have helped promote to pass that have helped propel Tennessee to the front of the nation here. So Representative Moody, I see you're with us. We'll start with you if we can, if you're able to answer that. Did you get to hear the questions?
Hello.
We may be having some technical difficulties.
Hello. I'm having a little. I am. I'll do my best. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hello. Okay. I think your first part of the question was, how did I find out and get involved in the trafficking issue? I was a church here in Memphis that we belong to. I was working with the youth department, and our youth pastor happened to mention we were actually taking out an offering for our ministry in India, but in his remarks he mentioned how the issue was huge here in Memphis, and so that sparked my attention and wanting to know more. But I wasn't in the legislature. I hadn't even dreamed I would be running. So it was just a breath of fresh air when I came to Nashville and met Representative Jim Coley. And he asked Representative Littleton and a couple of other freshmen if we were interested in helping him.
Oh, I think we're going to work just a second and see if we can improve our connection. So if you don't mind, Representative Littleton, I know we're kind of right in the middle of Representative Moody's story, but you just bumped up as far as squares go. If you want to share with us kind of your experience and your time in the legislature, how you've helped promote the issues related to human trafficking.
Well, first, I really want to thank you guys for letting me be a part of this. It means a lot to me because that's where my heart's at and where I concentrate most of my legislation. But just like Representative Moody, one of my first bills came from Representative Jim Coley. I didn't even know there was a problem with the human trafficking. I thought it was something that came from the overseas, the Asians, but no, it happens right here to our youngsters and our adults as well. But he did bring me my first bill, or asked me to carry it, and it was taking the parental rights from a parent that once they were convicted, if they had sold their child for sex. What a sad life for the child and for a parent to actually do something like that. So that touched my heart. And it's kind of like I tease and say, when you get to Legislative Plaza, which we used to be in 2012, it was like a maze there. And once we found our way around the building, then I wanted to find my place where what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be. And I have found it. There's nothing pretty about it, but we've been so successful in a lot of the bills that we've accomplished. And every year we have anywhere from 8 to 10 human trafficking bills, and we're bringing the ones last year that didn't get passed in the Senate. We're bringing all of those back. They come from the TBI, Human Trafficking Advisory Board. So they help me a lot as well. They help all of us as we struggle through these problems. But my little youth group, Dixon County Youth Group, brought me a bill 2 years ago, and they wanted the teachers to have a video to educate them on awareness of human trafficking. And they did such a fabulous job. And Margie helped us put that together. And how many teachers have seen that now, Margie? I don't remember. I know it's over 30,000 maybe.
Yeah, between, we started October of 2019 and we're at about 30,000.
But not only, a lot of times the teachers will say, please don't put anything else on us. But now they want it updated. They realize what the problem is, and they've asked us to update it. So it's been really good for me as a legislator, but it was really good for those youth leadership to find their place too, and really do something well for our state, but not just the state, for the whole United States and the whole country. So I'm really proud to be where I'm at. I tell everybody nothing I do is fun or happy. Every now and then I get a little fun bill, but it's all sad things. But look where we've come in Tennessee. So, and we hope that we're the guiding light for the whole nation. So again, thank you for letting me be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your efforts and the work that you've done on behalf of this issue. Representative Moody, I think we lost you mid-sentence. If you want to finish letting us know a little bit about kind of your history and the time that you've had to work in this field.
Yes. As you can see, I've joined Rachel, and hopefully this will keep us from coming back and forth. But yes, and Representative Littleton, that was an amazing bill to see her youth leadership come up with that. It was so exciting and been so impactful. And I think there were a couple pieces, and I'll keep it short, but I think the first one that I carried that very first year was to establish the Human Trafficking Task Force, is what we called it in the beginning. And I had no idea really what that meant. And I think now we call ourselves the advisory board. But oh my goodness, to be able to be part of that And then to see, it is brilliant to bring all the stakeholders, anybody that has any part in this human trafficking issue comes together, and we are able to know each other, know who to contact, who has the resource. It's just a beautiful thing. And so that's been fulfilling to get to see that come to fruition and actually be part of it. But the other one I think that I had no idea, was the one with the women who were charged with aggravated prostitution and being automatically put on the sex offender registry. And to meet, there were a couple of those survivors that were interested in the process, and to get to meet them and work with them, and they wanted to tell their story. And I told them, I said, nothing I could say could have any influence more than what your story is. And I was so proud of them. And then I still get to serve with some of them on this advisory board. But that was so eye-opening to see what they called survival when you heard their story, and why they still, even though they knew they had AIDS, they continued to work. And but as one of them said, it was for my survival, that their pimp had killed one of their girls in front of them. And it is horrific, like Representative Littleton said. Nothing about it is pretty, but how exciting. I can't tell you how fulfilling it is. And I'm grateful to be in this position. And when I leave this position, I will still be involved. But we are fighting evil, pure evil. And I am grateful for each one of you. And I'm grateful to be able to be here and join you all today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And Representative Lamar, thank you for joining us today. I just want to give a chance to hear from you and your perspective, your history, kind of coming alongside this fight against human trafficking, and what your work in the legislature is doing to help us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be on this amazing panel with all you. And I'm so excited to be here alongside my amazing colleagues, Representative Littleton and Representative Moody. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you in this fight to combat human trafficking, because I'm a sophomore legislator, so I'm very new to the legislature. But I decided to take on the issues on human trafficking because I was really moved and torn apart by the story of Miss Toya Brown. She obviously made national news about her story around human trafficking. Someone who didn't have a family, didn't have a mother. Mother used drugs while she was pregnant with her, and she had a pimp who, abused her. And the story really hit home for me, especially in my district where we have a couple of high prostitution areas as well. And so I was very moved by the story. And I decided that as a young woman, one of the few young women in the legislature, it is my responsibility and obligation to speak up and do something about it, walking into my role as a state representative. And so I walked in with a bill that aims to give victims of human trafficking a self-defense clause, so that when they are in danger or they do really feel like they need to protect themselves, then they can. Current Tennessee law does not have a self-defense statute for victims of human trafficking if they decide to protect themselves. And what we want to do is tighten up that loophole so we are not putting victims in the criminal justice system unfairly, and we're giving them out to express that they are in need of help, and if they want help. And there was a lot of issues with the bill at first, but I was able to build relationships with the Human Trafficking Advisory Committee. Thank you, Representative Moody, for pushing legislation before I even got here to create that committee that I'm able to take part in, and be able to build relationships with both the community organizations and working closely with RestoreCorps, who's doing an amazing job in my city of Memphis, Tennessee, in slavery, and everyone else who are doing great things, so that we can come together, get this language together. And we were able to pass this bill in the House last year. Now with COVID, it stopped in the Senate, but Senator Bowling is carrying the legislation again, and we expect it to go through the Senate very easily as well. So I'm just very excited to be able to not only represent, human trafficking and further doing work around that, but also be able to use that as a way of adding to criminal justice reform. That is something that I think our community is really wanting to see from the legislature. In addition, I was just been so excited to work with you all and so proud of the work that Restore Court End Slavery and all our other human trafficking organizations are doing on the ground. I want to further support you. And this year, in addition to that self-defense clause bill, I'm pushing a bill that was going to require health professionals to take human trafficking training so that when victims come into the hospital, they need the rape kits or they're looking for help, our professionals can identify a victim and be able to give them the services and direct them in the path that they need to go in order to make sure that they are supported. In addition, tighten up the Representative Moody was able to put on the books about getting teachers to undergo human trafficking training, and my bill will further tighten it up. They have to get that training again every 3 years, and that training can be produced and is already available by the work of End Slavery and Restore Tennessee. So it's not even going to cost us much, and they can do this online. So again, I don't think I'm the first person. God bless Representative Coley, who retired from the legislature. He's been an amazing mentor on this work and has taught me so much. And so I'm thankful for his advocacy to open the doors for young representatives like me and join the fight around human trafficking, and join Representative Moody, join Representative Littleton as we continue to fight for victims. And I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and appreciate y'all's sharing your kind of personal experience and all the work that you guys are doing to help keep Tennessee leading the nation. Christine, I just want to kind of kick it back to you based on kind of this new direction that Shared Hope is taking, or kind of new kind of benchmarks for assessment as far as statutory response to human trafficking. What do you see kind of as our roadmap in the sense of staying on the front edge and leading the nation in responding to human trafficking, and just kind of big picture suggestions for policy work or ideas that you might have from your work and research that you've done?
Sure. So thank you. I'm just really enjoying just hearing from everyone all of this history, and I think it's so great to hear kind of what has sort of led to Tennessee being the #1 state under the Protected Innocence Challenge. And I think Tennessee is well positioned as we're going into a new framework. But there are, again, one of the things that I wanted to mention with the framework, just like the old framework, we're looking at the statutes. We're looking at what's in law. And it's also, when we developed the initial framework in 2010, it was aspirational. For example, one of the things that Tennessee was one of the early states to do, but some states still haven't done, is to remove criminal liability for children for prostitution, and to recognize that a child who's been commercially sexually exploited is a victim of trafficking and should not be criminalized as a result of that victimization. And Tennessee was very early with making that change in 2011. But we're still working on that in 19 other states. But when we started, there were only 5 states that had removed some or all criminal liability for minors for prostitution. So a lot of progress has been made in that area, but there's still a lot of work to do. And the other thing that we've, I think, looking at that particular aspect of our work, we have in recent years really dug in on that issue in particular because, and I really appreciate Representative Lamar mentioning Cyntoia Brown's case. This is something that has been coming up in a number of contexts where we're seeing that not only are children being criminalized for prostitution, but they're also really being charged with a number of other offenses. And those offenses could range, it could be status offenses, which, in a lot of ways, status offenses are almost a red flag. I mean, you're talking truancy, not why is this child not in school? In some ways, status offenses are a reason to stop and ask the question, what's going on here? And so rather than, kind of using and unfortunately sometimes, if there's a child is identified as a status offender, how do we recognize that that child is a victim? And so we're looking for even more expanded protections from criminalization for children under the new framework. And so a number of things that we're looking at are protection from being criminalized for status offenses, and also protections as well for in situations like Cyntoia Brown, that there is some affirmative defense. There's an option and a way to recognize underlying victimization and prevent unfair criminalization. So that's really, I'd say that's kind of definitely a big picture area. Also, this ties in with some research that we also released and that Margie knows very well as a result of being part of Shared Hope's Just Response Council, and the council was very much a part of informing this research. It's the Sex Trafficking Victim Offender Intersectionality. It's a long title, but it was really, it's a guide for criminal justice stakeholders to really try to move toward more just responses in cases where trafficking survivors are facing trafficking charges and really other types of charges as well. So that has sort of influenced the new framework as well. And what always goes along with anytime we're talking about moving away from criminalizing child sex trafficking victims and youth is that there needs to be the service response. And Tennessee, obviously TASA has done amazing work, but what some of the things that we've heard over the years is that we need to have that. One of the reasons we look for sort of statutorily required service responses in states is because we're looking at, we want to see this be for the long term. We want to see it statewide, and having a statutory response really helps to do that, to make sure that this is something the state is committed to for the long run. And so that again that will carry over. That's been a focus of under our whole framework, and we will continue with that. And what we have sort of expanded on in that area is that we're also looking at funding, because funding is part of that. It's and it is in many of the states that have struggled to move forward with non-criminalizing approaches and direct, is that they don't. Oftentimes it's resource challenges in finding ways to direct children into services, and kind of falling back on the juvenile justice system as a way to connect kids with services. And we really want to move away from that model. So that really required also taking a look at funding. So Tennessee, I know, has historically, has in recent years been committing funding, and we also recognize as a result of the pandemic and the economic crisis, this is going to be hard for states. But again, it's an aspirational framework, and we really want to see all states sort of committing to long-term funded services. So I'd say those are definitely a couple of areas. One other area that I will flag, kind of just in kind of along the same theme, is robust post-conviction relief for children and youth as well. And I know it can be challenging sometimes to figure out ways where ideally the goal is to see a conviction recognized as unfair, unjust, if someone is convicted as a result of their trafficking victimization, and that conviction be removed. And I know we run into a lot of challenges in different states. Actually, we're working in a state that just started with a writ of essentially a writ of actual innocence. So there are different ways we're seeing states tackle this. And so those are some of the things we're trying to work toward as well. So I'm happy to answer any other questions about other areas, but those are just a few areas that I wanted to highlight.
Christine, I'd like to.
Thank you, Christine. I just wanted to say real quick that for any of the listeners or anybody that's on the live stream, if you have questions that you would like to pose to the representatives, to TASA, to Christine, that you go ahead and put those in the live stream chat, and we will try to get to as many of those as we can. And go ahead, Rachel, while we're getting some questions in. You can ask yours.
Christine, I'd like to ask you. You already mentioned. You already mentioned obviously where we can go for now. Continue to go for towards the roadmap. But could you actually kind of highlight for us even the reality that across the nation right now, there's a situation similar to Centoya happening in Texas, and tell us a little bit about that narrative for the listeners to even be able to engage this conversation at that higher level?
And I think, are you talking the case in Dallas, Seffi Trevino? Yes, yeah, and that's we do have a campaign on behalf of Seffi because unfortunately, this is what we're seeing. There are a number of cases we've seen in Ohio, Michigan, all around the country. We're increasingly seeing, and on one hand, I guess it's good because it means that there is media attention and the injustice is being recognized and picked up by the media. However, the fact that this sort of unjust circumstance is happening all around the country. There's a young woman just released from detention in California, again, like in a situation where, and this is a particularly, I think, challenging situation an important situation where recognizing underlying victimization makes all the difference. Mm-hmm. And so it comes down to, we need to recognize and have clear definitions. And that actually is part of what we're carrying over from the framework. It continues to be the framework, is we need to be clear. A commercially sexually exploited child is a victim of trafficking. There isn't this, and what goes along with that is that often trauma is very much a part of how a young person interacts and responds. And so, I don't know, I didn't want to cut off. One of the things that I think we're really kind of looking at with these cases is a threshold issue of, we need to recognize the underlying victimization. Mm-hmm. And see that this is a child who's been victimized. And then it puts an entirely different lens on the case. The case in Texas, unfortunately, her victimization is being denied. And as a result of not recognizing or even seeing that there is, this is a child sex trafficking victim, she's being treated as a criminal. She's being treated as even as a ringleader, which when we're talking about a traumatized teenager, it just doesn't make sense. So it's something that we definitely need to be having a conversation about and developing particular. That's why the framework does have, we're looking at affirmative defenses, as well as, I mean, really in the case in Texas, though, we're asking that the charges be dropped, because from the facts as they come across, this is a child trafficking victim being used as bait. She's not a criminal. Someone who's been coerced can't enter into a conspiracy because they're being coerced. So this is, we really hope to see things change in that case.
And I would tell the listeners that the TASA agencies have signed on the petition with Shared Hope to urge a second look at that particular case. I think it'd be interesting for the listeners, while we wait on some questions to come in, to tell the listeners and the viewers how many juvenile victims we are working with, each agency. About 25% of our caseload are juveniles. We served 170 folks in 2020. The average age of our juvenile client is 15. Some are in detention centers for other status or delinquent offenses, and some are community clients. Natalie, I know you guys have seen a real uptick in juvenile referrals. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. We saw this last year. We ended up serving 3 times as many kids as we had in years past. passed. And so that in and of itself is significant, on top of the fact that we were dealing with the pandemic, where, you know, we knew across the state our numbers were slowing down pretty dramatically across the board for all types of reports in child abuse. And so what we kind of attribute that to, and our kind of working model from that, is the importance of community collaboration. You know, we feel like those referral increases were an indication not of an increase in victimization, but really just an increase in communication, that we had our DCS partners knew us well, and we kind of had already built all of those lines of communication and lines of referral pre-pandemic. So, you know, we had, I think, close to 130, 140 referrals. We ended up working with 100, I think it was 101 kids last year. We had 100 kids who received services from us. And actually, it was the first time that referrals for kids exceeded the number of referrals for adults for our agency kind of as a whole. So it was a bit of a banner year. Hard to say that, you know, it's something that we're excited about, but we recognize, you know, that this is that many more kids receiving services. And, you know, in that, it is a win that we're kind of opening up those opportunities for our kids. And, you know, similar to our partner agencies across the state, one of the things we do for our kids is provide services in the home. So we provide therapeutic services in the home, and we provide case management in the home. And as we all know, Tennessee can be pretty expansive and pretty rural in some places. So we had, you know, therapists, and we had case care coordinators pre-pandemic who were going out into national forests and out into areas that don't have cell phone service. And, you know, that was one of the ways the pandemic in particular really affected us, were those kids who didn't have access to internet, who didn't have access to telehealth and teletherapy. You know, that was a hard hit for us. So we're looking forward to our public safety increasing so that we can continue to provide those services.
I too would say our youth numbers greatly exceed, almost double our non-youth referrals. Our youth referrals for last year is at 39% of our overall referrals for the year. And actually, I think all of our agencies too have made the shift to really also identifying the 18 to 24 range as what's called emerging adult. And that's even, I think all of our agencies are also really ahead of the game in that classification too, because that is also part of the new PIC, new Protected Innocent Challenge, to really identify not just what we're doing for youth very strategically in our state to provide specialized services, but why is it that if we can all agree at the 17-year-old, 16-year-old personhood, the victimization and the kind of robust support that youth or that teenager needs, that they flip the switch at 18 and they're treated drastically different, not only by the criminal justice system, but even the kinds of services that communities typically employ for those teenagers. And yet, I think also we all know that whether it's renting a car or other things, there's other models in our community every day that recognize there's still something that happens in that under 25 range of adulthood that need a different kind of a support system, need a different kind of provision for life. And so when we add in that 18 to 24, that actually makes up 66% of our overall caseload. So 66% of our referrals from last year are 24 years and younger within our agency, and those numbers likely track across the state. So we're really delighted to now continue to do that growth. I think that I intended to say that in part of my introduction, and I ran over my own notes. Christine, thank you for pointing out that we did pass decriminalization of a minor in 2011. So now we're having this virtual roundtable discussion with all of our legislators a decade later. And so we do get the opportunity to look back and see that we were on that first wave. As you mentioned, only 5 other states were ahead ahead of us, passing that decriminalization. But now seeing that even kind of the nuances that you were mentioning with Zeffie's case, how Representative Lyndon Lamar was already sponsoring the law last year to kind of take that into consideration. And so it's really, I feel very encouraged to be not just alongside my TASA partners, but alongside the General Assembly, these women on the General Assembly and the others who are also passionate about it. And as we can all give the shout outs to Representative Coley, to not rest on our laurels, but very humbly say and excitedly say the last decade has been incredible and Tennessee's done some work, but there's more work to do. So I think that on that note, we're going to pivot to some of the questions that are coming into the chat box. I think this one is going to be for you, Natalie, first.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So Second Life transitioned out of direct services, and Margie and Rachel, you can correct me if I've got my timeline wrong, but really kind of beginning of 2019. And so our TASA as a whole, you know, we have a responsibility and we're tasked with kind of covering every county in Tennessee, making sure that every county has access to services, that we are accountable for individuals who experience this type of victimization, and that we're helping coordinate the community. So when that happened, when that shift occurred, our TASA partners kind of came to the table and kind of split up and covered the counties that had previously been covered by Second Life Tennessee. So for Chattanooga proper, that now falls into Grow Free Tennessee's jurisdiction. It's in our region, and we serve quite a few of the counties surrounding Chattanooga, but that's right on the line that separates our service region from end slavery. And we kind of follow that very traditional, now we follow that kind of traditional West, Middle, East Tennessee designation.
Sure. So this next question, Margie and I probably would do well to tag team it. Margie likely better than myself, but the current laws in Tennessee about children who are victims but treating as offenders, it is we've actually decriminalized the actual charge of delinquent prostitution. That's what we've mentioned a couple of times, where previously, prior to 2011, a juvenile who was engaging in exchanging something of value for sex would have been charged with delinquent prostitution and gone into the juvenile court system. So that very specific, clear charge has now been removed from the books, and they're treated differently if it would have been that charge. But it's what we've been discussing today is kind of the affiliate victim offender dynamic that happens in the context of human trafficking, that oftentimes a victim, juveniles and adults, but juveniles especially, tend to be compelled by their traffickers, coerced by their traffickers to also engage in additional illegal activity, whether that's what Christina Raino was mentioning about Zeffie, utilizing her as a bait for buyers and then stealing from the buyer in the process, and the correlating crime that oftentimes is part of the larger picture of what's in play. We here at RestoreCorps, one of our first juvenile referrals from our juvenile court system was actually a local public defender that was dialoguing and just had the wherewithal to listen a little bit more to the story and hear the victim noting that she was in the backseat with an older man. She took the gun charge, ... and having enough questions about the time that this backseat with older man was happening, the time of day, what was happening, where the older man would have compelled her to take the gun charge and more. So a lot of times it's the victim, the correlating crimes, as well as eventually the victim offender paper that Margie will expand on in just a moment, is the reality that oftentimes a victim will turn offender to decrease her own victimization as part of the overall dynamics in the traffickers, what's called the trafficker stable of women. So with that, Margie, I'm going to pass it to you to continue to expound on that question.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I, for the listeners, spent 26 years in law enforcement. That was my sort of first career, and I joined the Juvenile Sex Trafficking Council with Shared Hope as an assistant special agent in charge at TBI, and I had the privilege of overseeing the creation of the statewide enforcement unit at TBI. So I have been around, like Rachel, since 2010, 2010, working on the laws, working on the policy, kind of pushing Tennessee forward. We're also talking about crimes, status offenses and delinquent offenses. Status offenses can be multiple runaway incidents, curfew, truancy, all the way through delinquent acts, drug possession, theft of vehicles, gun charges, as Rachel stated. And all of these come about as a result of the complex trauma that they experience as a trafficking victim. Many were exposed to traumatic incidents in their past. Some have prior histories of childhood sexual abuse, drug addiction, addiction and violence in the home. There are a number of really complicated issues in the backgrounds of many of these child survivors. And so this is really about taking a look at that and understanding why the behavior happened, what prompted the behavior, and are they really criminally liable for the action. And so there are a number of juveniles who are coming through the juvenile justice system, and a lot of times that's how we get referred to juveniles, is through juvenile court. And so on the flip side, if a juvenile is charged with a delinquent or status offense under a petition, what we'd like to see is, once a thorough investigation has been done, that those charges potentially are dropped and or expunged. And we know that juvenile records are sealed, but the act of expungement, wiping away that charge and conviction, I think psychologically and emotionally can be really important for survivors. And so on the adult side, I just flip real quickly to the adult side. We a couple of years ago got a great expungement law on the books. The General Assembly passed expungement for adults. The problem with that, and the problem that we've identified within that statute, is that there's a prostitution conviction that triggers the access to that expungement. Through the Cherished Hearts Court in Davidson County, which is the prostitution and human trafficking court, and some great analysis by the Vanderbilt Law Clinic, we know that at least 2/3 of women coming through the Cherished Hearts courts do not have prior prostitution convictions, which means the expungement law is not available to them. If you were to arrest somebody early in their victimization at 18, 19 years old, it's entirely possible that they have not been arrested or charged with prostitution yet. And so what we want to do is do a little work on that so that we make sure the expungement laws are available to the victims, and that there is not a triggering prostitution offense that associated with that statute. I hope that has answered the questions about the laws regarding children victims in the state. Well, that is
a short answer. I hope so.
Yeah, that is a question that's going to be very near and dear to our hearts at TASA for sure. And I don't want to put any of our awesome representatives on the spot, but previously the TASA agencies have had access to grant funding through the state of Tennessee. Obviously, COVID was a really unique year, and we hope to see the restoration of that funding through the governor's administration or the General Assembly. But I'll turn it over to Representatives Lamar, Littleton, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, I'm certainly hoping that we can get it through, and I know that we'll all sign on to it and meet with the governor and tell him how important this is. But I meant to give a shout out to First Lady Maria Lee too. She has chosen January to be her Human Trafficking Month, and that's her goal, is to learn more about it and to influence people to support it. So maybe she can help convince her husband to do that as well.
Absolutely. I share those same sentiments as Representative Littleton. And again, I do think that we have to continue to do more to close those loopholes and further put more things on the book so that we can protect victims. And again, which is why I'm pushing my bill with the self-defense clause and things like that. So I'm just, excited to be able to join you and my other colleagues and hopefully be able to join in the conversation with Governor Lee about the necessity of funding for victim services, and even having the privilege now to sit on Finance, Ways and Means and Appropriations Subcommittee. Hopefully I can be on the committee to articulate the need for more funding for victim services. So I am here to help. I think you're muted.
That's a great question, Lee Ellen. How can the general public help TASA and the state representatives? I know that the TASA agencies are very active on social media. We are putting a lot of information out there. I know we all have newsletters, so I would urge you in whatever region of the state that you're in to sign up for newsletters, follow these TASA agencies on social media, follow Representative Lamar or Littleton on Twitter and other social media platforms. They're tweeting about it as well. And if you have any bills that you are particularly interested in, you can contact our agencies and we will help you craft letters or talking points so that you can articulate the need to our legislature. That's a great question. Thank you.
Can I jump in and also answer?
Absolutely.
Yes, I do want to second the importance of, following us on social media and our legislation, but I want to overly emphasize the need to write letters and come testify on these bills. And it's really simple. If you go to capital.tn.gov, you can click our names, you can see our bills and click on them, and you can follow where they are in the committee process or in the legislative process. And, when they're sitting in our subcommittees and our full committees, look at the members of the committees and email them and say, I want you to support Representative Littleton's bill. I want you to support Representative Moody's bill. I need you to support my bill, Representative Lamar's bill. And that way, it's not just the grassroots organization doing much of the legwork. It's not us representatives just doing a lot of legwork. But what we want to see as legislators is the people's interest in this legislation. And when our committee members and legislators know voters are watching and they want their support and they're listening, they're more likely to support or think twice before they vote something down. And so it's imperative that we have citizen advocacy alongside our legislative advocacy to get legislation passed. Citizens got to realize it's not just enough to vote and support, candidates who are doing human trafficking work, but you have an obligation to take part in the legislative process as your right as a citizen lobbyist.
I think
that as well. That's exactly what we need. And I want to bring back the video that we did with the youth leadership that is all across the state that every teacher has watched at their in-service. And it's on the wellness program for the students as well to watch. And we hope the parents will watch it too. But input from constituents, anyone all across the state, we do listen to that, and we do take it to heart, and we do like hearing your stories that help us connect with our bills so that we can feel more passionate about them as well. So input is really nice. Emails are great. Phone calls are, sometimes we get to those and sometimes we don't, just depends on how long we're in session and those type things. But emails are wonderful, and we enjoy input from everyone across the state.
I'd like to also just echo from my own perspective. I started working in the background towards some of these bills as early as 2010, 2011, and RestoreCorps as an entity or RestoreCorps as having a safe house didn't happen until 2017. So honestly, a lot of our original work was really staying in the ears of our Tennessee General Assembly and saying that these are the ways that Tennessee needs to change. We were working in that work with other people here in Memphis that we were co-laboring with, so to speak. And it has gotten me to the place. I want to express just my gratitude to our General Assembly again, because it's gotten me to the place where even if I'm in kind of citywide discussions with another agency that's trying to serve a victimized population, and they might remark, well, we have to do it this way because of our Tennessee code has been ... not updated, or this is what's going on. And I just so naturally say, well, why don't we also work on that? Why don't we change it? And so I know that if it's a burden of yours for victims or marginalized or particular people in our community, there is a General Assembly member somewhere who wants to also come alongside that voice. And so I want to just echo just from my own personal perspective, how it has changed the way that I view the world. That, as you said, Representative Lamar, it's not just enough to vote, but how we can, as citizens, consistently engage in how our overall law says our values, or says the things that we think are important in our communities, and that we get to play a part in that process.
So yes, the short answer, Rebecca, a great question, is yes. The TASA agencies engage pretty regularly in training our state court judges. I spent last fall 4 hours with the TBI training the state court judges. We're looking at another training session with some of the attorneys that work in juvenile courts, the GALs, that's the guardian ad litems, who represent juveniles. We are asked to do a lot of training. As Representative Littleton and Lamar indicated, there is a mandatory public school educator training that started in October of 2019. And the TASA agencies are now working on a comprehensive training and programming edition with the Tennessee Department of Corrections. You'll see that coming out later this year. We're going to be training all of the Department of Corrections and Probation and Parole, as well as formulating a new video series for women who are incarcerated in prisons and other victims who may be identified in prisons. And then we will follow that up with additional programming by region. So there's a lot of great stuff going on that have to do with training and awareness, because we know that the more we get that training out there, the more referrals we get. So those opportunities that we have when victims bump into the system, whether that's in hospitals or in schools or in courts, if those folks are trained to recognize and identify trafficking, there's a much better chance that that victim will get identified and potentially referred to services. So that's a great question. Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've had the opportunity to train with the Juvenile Justice Conference. We're getting ready. We did that last year, and we're getting ready to repeat that again this spring, which we're always excited about that opportunity. And then we partnered really closely with the TBI. We regularly train the new recruiting class or graduating class of law enforcement officers up at Walters State Community College. We travel up there on a quarterly basis to provide training for them. So those are new officers who are coming into the field, and give them an opportunity to understand, particularly what you hit on in your question, not just about this victimization, not just about the criminal statutes, but the dynamic that goes behind that, really understanding what that looks like for them and what it'll look like in the field.
I think the only thing that I would have to add to that is, Rebecca, your question is obviously insightful, but it also leads me to wonder if you know someone who, or a connection that you have to a group of judges or prosecutors that you would like to ensure gets a training. And so I think that it's both and, that we can come from a systemic place and create the teacher education training, like what we've mentioned, and the DOC training that we're working on for this year. But if there are individual people in different communities across our state that know that they want to ensure that their judges, their prosecutors, their public defenders, their juvenile court magistrates that you want to be a voice in that community that says, I think that it's important that these people in places of power and influence understand the psychology, understand this paradigm, then I think, too, I would recommend again, going on our websites, emailing through what you see on our websites for contact us portals, because even here locally, like we are working on nailing down a date for our juvenile court magistrate training, but juvenile court systems across our state are isolated in their overall governing. And so that actually needs to be initiated by each juvenile court jurisdiction to desire that training. Whereas other, like the Department of Correction training, when we work with Tennessee Department of Corrections as a whole for the Tennessee prisons, that can be a training that we implement statewide. Then there's going to be other layers that we all need to work together as a community to ensure that the training gets to those other layers. So y'all, it is 12:59, and we want to make sure that we honor your lunch hour. And I just want to say again, Christina Raino, Representative Littleton, Representative London Lamar, and honestly, my world-changing colleagues from the Tennessee Anti-Slavery Alliance across the state. Thank you. Thank you for spending your Friday this way with us. Thank you for the work that you do. Shared Hope International leading the way to make it easy on us to figure out what to do next. I think that we've spoken, Tassa spoke at last Shared Hope International conference, and that we did have in person in 2019. And that's one thing that I said is, for any state who wants to be number one, Shared Hope's already done a lot of the work for you to figure out how to get there. And then it's us coming behind, making, finding relationships with each state's General Assembly and doing the work. So thank you, Representative Littleton and London Lamar, for being in it with us.